I was talking about Wildstar, Nick Wildstar, Governor Wildstar, and his case. So long story short, he tried to film his own trial in a court that has no record. So there's no court reporter. And he was thrown out of the court, and later he was charged with contempt of court. And he was convicted by a jury on 6 counts of disturbing the peace of the courtroom. Which is bullshit, because all he was doing was trying to record. And this is something I've been thinking about a lot lately, because I know the system that he went through pretty well. This is the California court system. I know a lot of the tricks they play. I've seen a lot of the video of what he did. And so, I keep playing it over and over in my head, thinking of different ways to get him out of the predicament that he's in. He thinks he's looking at 6 years. I think he's looking at a maximum of 1 year, or 6 months. But, it's anybody's guess at this point, because the corrupt-ass courts will do whatever the fuck they want. But I want to bring up some really important points that I've seen so far on this. So, first of all, when he went to these initial trials, these were trials in front of a commissioner, which is not a real judge. They're not elected. They have no oath of office. They have no legal authority to have a court. But what they do is they get you to consent to their jurisdiction voluntarily. Usually what they'll do is they'll make an announcement before the court starts. Sometimes what they'll do, and in Nick's case, they gave him a paper that had, know your rights, and buried deep within that was, this is a commissioner's court, and unless you object to the commissioner's court, this court will act as a lawful court. Or you agree that this court will, act as a lawful court. So, the video footage shows he walks in there, he starts talking, and he says, things like, you have no jurisdiction. He said, what did he say? He said, I have no contract with the state of California. Well, this document is basically an implicit contract. What they're saying is, if you don't disagree, you agree to the contract, which in itself is bullshit, but that's what they do, because they don't want people asking questions and, sign this. When you're asked to sign something, then that's when people start asking questions. Well, what does this mean? By making it implicit, nobody asks questions. They just say, well, I don't understand this and I don't want to look like an idiot, so I'll just pretend I know my rights. He said he doesn't have a contract, which means he objected to the terms of that court, and then he was intimidated by officers and pushed out of the court. He was swarmed by like 10 cops who were just like, yep, come on, let's go. You're out of here. Let's go. Now think about this. What kind of trial does that happen where they throw you out like that? And they don't say, okay, well, if you're not going to appear, if you're not going to do your appearance, if you're not going to plead guilty or not guilty, if you're not going to play our little game, we're going to arrest you. What happens if you get a failure to appear? If you don't appear to your court case, they issue a warrant, right? Supposedly. Especially if it's a real crime, they'll issue an arrest warrant. They'll go arrest you. They'll put you in jail, and then they'll schedule another date for you to come to court. In what world do they just throw you out of the court and say, okay, fine, you don't want to play our game, get the fuck out of here? They understood that he was objecting, and that's why they threw him out. Now, this is very important, because when we talk about the charges that were put up against him for contempt of court, you can't walk into a McDonald's and say, hey, fuck you guys, fuck you, and then be charged with contempt of court. because that is not a court. And so he is being charged, or he was charged, with contempt of court, and there was never a court. He didn't agree, he objected to the jurisdiction of that other court, and therefore it never became a court. And so he could legally, factually, never be charged with contempt of a court that he was never in. Now here's the problem. He hired a lawyer to defend him. And, well, I mean, let me start here. He didn't recognize this issue. I don't know that I would have in time, but I mean, this is the complexity of the system. And in order to just exercise your rights, you need to know so much. And so in his trial, this point was never brought up. He didn't know to bring it up. His lawyer, his bar-certified, government-certified lawyer, did not know to bring this up. And I've talked about this issue to many lawyers, and they don't even really understand it. They think it's like, oh yeah, it's nothing. Yeah, it's just like a, yeah, he's not a real judge, but you just agree to it, and that's what it is. They don't think anything of it. Why do they do this? Why? And why is it that these courts never have a court reporter? They never have a stenographer. They never have a record. They don't even record it on tape. His trial for contempt of court was an actual judge, so I'm sure there's at least a tape recording of that. It was broadcast on YouTube, but they broadcast it, in this live format, so it's not saved, so you can't go back and rewatch it later. So there's no recording of it there. Although the judge apparently told him, well, I can't stop you from recording that, so if you want to record it yourself. So he has to have somebody at home on the computer recording the live stream as it goes down. And what happens if there's a problem with the internet? Okay. It's total bullshit. And so this guy's just sitting here trying to exercise his rights, and you have to be not only a lawyer to understand what your rights are, because apparently most lawyers don't even understand what your rights are. You have to know so much just to exercise your rights. And so now he's facing somewhere between 6 months and 6 years in jail for attempting to exercise his rights, which the courts will not educate him on. The courts will not recognize, oh, okay, he's trying to exercise his rights, he just doesn't know how to do it, let me help him out. No, that doesn't happen. Instead, they just say, well, you're not using the right magic words, we're going to throw you in jail. He was charged with contempt of court, and there was no court. And because his lawyer didn't bring this issue up, it's going to be very difficult for him to make an appeal based on that. Because the way the appeal system works is you can only appeal decisions that were made in the lower court. You cannot make new arguments to the appeals court. There is one exception that I know of, and that's where you can claim that you didn't have adequate legal representation. Basically saying your lawyer ain't shit. They should have objected to something and they didn't. In this case, they should have objected to the charges and said that he can't be charged with contempt of court because there was no court. So what I'm thinking about doing right now is writing an open letter to the judge explaining this and asking him to overturn the jury's decision. But of course, he's probably not going to be able to make that decision because the way the courts work, the way the court, and to be fair, there's a lot of it makes sense the way it works. I don't want to say that the whole thing is trash, but there are some parts that make sense where you need to submit evidence in a certain order so that everyone has the ability to respond to that evidence in the right way. Unfortunately, what that means is a testimony is considered evidence, and so to testify whether or not there was a court, whether or not this was a court where this took place, you would need a witness to testify. Someone would need to say, this is a court. Maybe it's going to happen because, we have video footage showing him objecting. So maybe it's argumentative at this point. The prosecutor is going to object and say, no, this was a court. He's going to make whatever arguments he can, saying, oh, no, he didn't object in the proper way. He didn't use the right words to object. That's what they're going to say. What are the right words to object? See if you can answer that question. So it's difficult. He's in a hole. It's going to be difficult to get out. But he's a good friend. He's a dedicated activist. He's standing up for his rights, for your rights, for everybody's rights, against the corrupt system. And I'm just trying to figure out any way possible to reduce the damage that this system is going to do on him. So there's that. I'm trying to help him get through an appeal. And, I don't want to bash his lawyer too much. She sounded like, her heart was in the right place, but she doesn't know all these things that she doesn't know. I mean, we're dealing with this on a level that most lawyers won't touch. I mean, from what I understand, she was a civil rights lawyer, and so, you can make arguments on civil rights laws and all this other stuff, but that's like arguing about the rules of a board game when we're saying we have no obligation to play the board game in the first place. And the court system knows this because that is their system. They obviously understand this because they put those rules on the paper saying, if you don't object, you're playing the board game. The lawyers don't understand this. And in fact, they think we're fucking crazy for saying it. And I know this because I've got friends who are lawyers who think I'm crazy. But at the same time, I show them what I've done and they can't explain it. Because they're trying to explain it within the context of, no, everybody's playing the board game already. You can't just opt out and say, I don't want to play the board game. And they equate that to, if anyone could just opt out, how come, you can't just murder somebody and then just opt out and say your courts don't apply to me? Which is, it's a fair question. But there's a substantial difference between prosecuting a crime under a republic at the will of the people on behalf of a victim versus the state trying to take out its baby rage on you because you didn't follow one of their little micromanagement rules and forcing you to play some game, forcing you to enter into contracts so that they can do something about it, because otherwise they wouldn't have any legal authority to do anything about it. There's a huge difference. Super important, guys, because these are your rights. How do you exercise your rights? People talk about, I've got my Second Amendment rights, I've got my First Amendment rights, I've got this, I've got that. Do you really have these rights if you don't know how to exercise them? And if they can pull these tricks on anybody and say, hey, you know what? You don't have any rights. If you don't do 5 jumping jacks right now, you lose all your rights. In fine print at the bottom of a contract, and then you walk in and you're going to do something and like, oh, no, sorry, you surrendered your rights. What do you mean I surrendered? Well, you didn't do the 5 jumping jacks, did you? No. Oh, well, now you just admitted that you surrendered your rights. What are you talking about? Well, it says right there, if you don't do 5 jumping jacks, you surrender your rights. I never agreed to those terms. That's bullshit. This is what they do. And if you don't understand this, they're gonna screw you hard, and they do it. They do it to millions of people every single day. So anyway, guys, those are my morning thoughts. That's one of the things I'm working on. Free Wildstar. All right, guys, I'll catch you later. Taxation is theft.